My name is Jane, and I was really delighted to be able to collaborate with CSE Career Services, who had the idea of this event. I am the UMN International Career Consultant. I use she, her pronouns, and my position on campus supports undergraduate international students' career development. And I'll pass it over to Chrissy.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chrissy. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career counselor in the College of Science and Engineering. So for all of you that are joining today, I can be a good resource for you. And we have other career counselors in our office too that would be happy to meet with you and talk a little bit more in depth about some of these topics today.
And our agenda is that we will, we're very excited to have a CSE alum with us, Shane, who will share a bit about his career story. And then we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions and have a brief discussion also with Shane. And then Chrissy and I will share resources for job search strategies for CSE international students at the end of our presentation. We also hope everyone will keep in mind that we are not going to get into the specifics of work authorization during this session, which is CPT or OPT, because that's a really important conversation for you to have with ISSS. And ISSS also has tons of resources on their websites. There are modules that students need to complete before applying for CPT and OPT. And through those, you can learn everything that you need to know to be able to do the right paperwork and also advocate for yourself with employers. So feel free to take a note of these Z links, z.umn.edu/STEM OPT, which may be particularly of interest to our CSE international students, but also you can change the end of that Z link to just OPT or CPT if you would like to learn about those to start with. Now we will transition into our discussion with Shane, Shane graduated from CSE in 2018. And has been working as a software engineer at Amazon since February of 2020. Shane graduated with Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and has had a lot of great career experiences while still a student and after graduation, and has been such a great mentor and partner who likes to share experience and help support and motivate fellow international students. So we're really grateful. Shane had some time to share with us today. So I'm going to pass it over to Shane to share his career story. First, we added your slide into our next slide here, and then we'll have a Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, this looks perfect. Thanks for the great introduction, and also thank you for inviting me to this presentation. I'm happy to be here and happy to just share my experiences during my time in the US, and to anyone who might be interested to either follow on a similar path or like just a tangent path. My door is always open. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm open door to any questions that you guys might have. With that being said, I think I can go right into the next slide.
Does this look right?
It's still showing my intro slide. Okay, there we go. All right. I just thought it would be easier for me to talk about my own experience, just listing out what happened as the moment I got to the US. But first and foremost, my home country is Malaysia. So I grew up in Malaysia, and then I took a kind of American degree transfer program to transfer to the University of Minnesota. So I first arrived in Minnesota as started off as a sophomore or junior. Initially, I was planning to major in computer engineering. But as you can see, after a semester of computer engineering, I realized that I really enjoyed more of the programming aspects of CE. So I switched to computer science in January 2017. But I think more relevant to this talk is in November. So when I first arrived in Minnesota, I immediately started to look for like job opportunities around the university. And I think one major resource that I think has been replaced by Handshake, I believe, was Gold Pass in the past, where that was the university like job portal where most jobs were listed. And I found a position as a technology help student position, working part-time on CPT. And this job was basically a kind of customer service phone desk job where I was basically handling requests from people around the university, mainly like password resets and whatnot. Anything to do with like IT help, like getting access to a certain lab or a certain classroom. And I thought that was a job that most international students didn't realize we were eligible for. And I thought it paid really pretty good too. So it's something that I've been trying to ask students to like look into during your time at the U. So yeah, January 2017, I switched majors to computer science. And then throughout 2017, while working that technology help job, I attended multiple hackathons across multiple states across the US, mainly going like on road trips with friends. And I think the experiences that I had during these hackathons really helped boost my resume. Basically, my resume at the time was just a one-pager with skills and experiences. And then work experience was limited because I only had my technology, like IT job. And then I had a section for projects, which was where I listed all the projects that I worked on during the hackathons. And I thought it was a really easy way to like just put on like really good looking projects for potential employers, because during the hackathon, you're basically spending like 48 hours or 72 hours straight just solving a really hard problem and then presenting it to a panel of judges and then earning prizes from all of that. So throughout that short amount of time that you invest in, you actually gain a lot of project management experience. So I would say like, even if you're not in computer science or if you're in some other major, don't think that hackathons are only about programming. It's a lot also about like product management, marketing, and also a lot of soft skills that most companies nowadays are looking for. And it could be a good way for you to, make your resume look more attractive. And then that's why using that resume, I was able to, throughout 2018, started to pivot and transition to interviewing for some companies around the university. I worked at a small, I think it was a small electronics company right near Como as a C++ developer intern. And then and then a couple of months later, I also secured a job as a Python developer for a civil engineering research lab, as well as a web developer for a astrophysics research lab. And all these jobs were on CPT. And the way I found these jobs were a combination of using Gold Pass, as I mentioned, and also the notice boards that y'all would see around Keller or any of the other buildings, where people used to put like paper ads on there. And basically they would say like, looking for a student developer position, and basically just applying through the Z-links that they had on there. So I think my takeaway from this is just don't be afraid to apply, and don't be afraid to like look for jobs. Like, even though I landed these jobs, I actually applied to way more than just these jobs. Like, I applied to probably like 30 other jobs, both online and like in person. And it ended up like, just again, like it just kind of like strengthened my resume even more, that in June 2018, during the CSE job fair, I was able to just passing my resume to PwC, was able to land like an interview with them on site. So basically, the interview was held in Carlson School of Management, and I was able to get an internship offer with their cybersecurity department in San Francisco on OPT. And then I think the experience at PwC was even greater than whatever I had thus far, because during my internship, I learned that apparently there are a bunch of there are a bunch of big companies out there that are actually seeking interns in order to convert them to full-time at the end of the internship. So in a way, PwC was like a two birds in one stone, kind of, in the sense that I got my internship, but at the end of the internship, it was an almost guaranteed full-time offer. So I got my full-time offer for PwC right at the end of my summer internship in 2018, which was great. And then I graduated end of 2018 and started working for PwC Minneapolis beginning of 2019. And then gratefully, PwC was able to sponsor my H-1B visa. So, and I got it my first year on STEM OPT. But then towards kind of, July, August-ish, I was just looking at some opportunities for other tech companies around the area. And funnily enough, I got the initial Amazon interview through Facebook, through a Facebook hackathon group that I had joined back in my hackathon years. There was a recruiter that made a post on there saying that they were looking for software engineers in Seattle for Amazon, and then in this Facebook hackathon group, and I just like sent a private message to the recruiter and asked more about it. Ultimately leading to them inviting me to Seattle to interview, and then ultimately getting the offer. And then in August, and then this was where I hit a little bit of a snag visa-wise, because I was still waiting on my H-1B from PwC, but I already had an offer from Amazon. So I had to wait until October 2019, where my H-1B visa was approved, by which I was able to transfer the H-1B to Amazon. And then in between that time, I decided to spend some time back home with family, and then before starting work with Amazon, also on H-1B. And then that's where I've been since 2020. And then, as you all know, like during the pandemic, it was mostly working from home, and then with a sprinkling of going to the office. And then earlier this year, or last year, 2021, I got promoted to L5, and I've since initiated the green card process. And then, but as you can see, I started the application in April, and it's been almost a year now, and I'm still waiting on the green card application to be approved. So I have a lot of thoughts on that as well. So like if anyone on this call like wants to know a bit more about visa or like green card process, I'm also happy to talk about that. So yeah, and then right now I recently just changed teams internally in Amazon. So I initially worked for Amazon Kindle, working on their test automation, and then recently switched teams to Amazon Web Services, working as a software engineer for the customer engineering org, which is more building cloud AWS services for third-party customers. So it's been a pretty interesting switch, but in Amazon, and I think most big tech companies, like they're super supportive of that, no matter like who you are, as long as you have the passion and you want to make the switch, you can make it happen. So I'm also happy to talk more about that as well. So yeah, I think you guys are all up to date on what happened to me the past few years. So
thank you so much, Shane, for walking us step by step through your career journey. I think many students who are listening could probably relate to trying out different activities or hoping to see like similar amazing results as you have had. One thing I really loved from you sharing your story is kind of the idea of looking at maybe non-traditional sources for finding career opportunities, like a Facebook group, or finding posters like posted up in the buildings at the U. Looking at all these different sites seems to have helped you to find unique career opportunities.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I also want to add, like, I think I'm not sure if this is specific to computer science, but like I think I initially added like the civil engineering research lab and astrophysics research lab as like a point to make that you don't really have to find jobs within your like major. Like there's opportunities for you to apply what you learned in your major in cross like other majors as well. And I was actually pretty surprised to see that, you know, in other fields, they needed like software developers as well. Meanwhile, in computer science, you needed like, you know, people who studies psychology or other social sciences to help out to supplement that research. So I guess try to broaden your scope of your search and don't, you know, tunnel vision on just your own major.
Right. That's a really great point. Not thinking like as a computer science major, you have to be a computer scientist, but like, what are you learning in that major and how can that apply to roles that you might not expect? So we are in the open Q&A portion of our event. So we're wondering if any students have questions. You can enter them in the chat or use the raise hand feature in Zoom. We wanted to have some time where you could ask your own questions to Shane about job searching. Nope.
While we're waiting, I'll kick us off with a question. Shane, could you just talk a little bit about how you kind of remain resilient in the process, and if you had feelings of discouragement and what kind of helped motivate you to keep going, because it can be difficult to do a job search. And as an international student, you had additional barriers kind of in place. You weren't able to work with any employer you wanted, but you still did a fantastic job in your journey. So could you just speak to that a little bit and how you maintained your motivation?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think the first thing that came to my mind was just the mentors and like, first of all, mentors and seniors that were around me, just to kind of you know, reflect on their experience and then understanding like, you know, how hard a job search for an international student actually goes. I think, yeah, I'm just trying to remember during my during like 2016 or 2017 when I first came to the US. I think there was a CSE mentorship program where the university actually connects someone from the industry with a sophomore or junior in a specific major. And I actually did connect with a senior who studied computer science at the U in CSE. And we talked a lot about, you know, setting up like SMART goals and like setting up some measurable, a measurable timeline to kind of, first of all, like strengthen my own resume, strengthen my own skills. Because when I first arrived in the US, like I didn't really have any technical skills or programming skills for that matter. And all of it had to be like built incrementally until I got to a point where I could and then go for something else. So I think the mentorship aspect really helped. And I think I got like 2 or 3 mentors from that program that were already currently working as software engineers. So I really got a lot of perspective from them. Also, I think ISSS had a couple of really good advisors to walk me through like OPT and CPT to figure out what I could and couldn't do. As well as, let's see, yeah, like just thinking about when I was applying for a job, like I think one of the big takeaways from one session that I had with, I can't remember if it's CSE or ISSS, was don't be afraid to apply, even though like the employer says like work authorization is required, because a lot of times the employers don't really know what they mean when they say like they eventually they just want to know that you're able to work, and the real answer to that is you are able to, because you have OPT and CPT to supplement your first few years of working, and then once that runs out you need your H-1B. But most of the time employers just want to know, are you able to work now? And the answer most of the time is yes. So I would say having that courage to just go and apply and reach out, that was a kind of like a muscle that I had to train over time, that I didn't have when I first came to the US. Yeah, and then, you know, like having all those little experiences, going to hackathons and learning, and like just meeting other university students studying computer science or some other major in other states and other schools, and what they're going through and what resources they had, also helped out, I think, because like, you know, resources are just different in every university, and having a look at what other people are doing helped a lot as well. I think, yeah. And yeah, and as for like, I think going back to your question about like resilience, yeah, like a lot of the, like, I guess I kind of remember like where I said throughout 2018, like having those small, having those like part-time jobs as interns or as a Python developer. A lot of the times, yeah, like I definitely do remember like applying for and interviewing for a lot of the jobs on campus and not getting the job and feeling like very demotivated and feeling like, oh, I'm just not good enough. But then ultimately, it's just having to realize that it's not about you. It's just by chance or randomly that you didn't get the job, and you just have to move on and go to the next one. Yeah, like I said, it has to do with like that muscle that you train, which is just to keep going. Yeah.
That's an amazing response. I love hearing about how mentorship was really impactful to you, and also how you participated in hackathon. Sounds a lot like networking, which can sound really scary sometimes, but it seems like the hackathons were like a fun way to exchange information and connect with peers who are kind of in the same career field.
Right, for sure. And yeah, like a lot of the hackathons nowadays, like because of the pandemic, is usually either, you know, most of them are free, and I think most of them are also remote nowadays. But I would definitely recommend going to one in person, just because like if you're like me and you find networking super awkward and like weird, hackathons are a great way to like have a group of random people band together to work to solve a problem. And just by virtue of solving that problem, at the end of it, you're gonna have a lot of things in common to talk about and to network about. And yeah, that's basically just how you grow your connections and find opportunities.
That sounds awesome. We also had a question from a student in the room, Zanelli, who I'm wondering if we can kind of broaden on Zanelli's question of kind of when and how have you in your different career experiences talked about the eventual need for sponsorship? You talked a bit about your experience with this, but I wonder if kind of broadening on that question, how did you talk about international student status with employers, and how did that go for you?
Yeah, I think I touched a little bit on that earlier, but the bottom line is you don't mention it. Well, I never, for my own personal experience, I never mentioned it ever during the interview stage, and even after I got the offer. But I think in a sense I was super lucky, because in the case for PwC, as long as you got a full-time offer and you're international, they already have like lawyers to help with the H-1B sponsorship. So they already do sponsor. but I would say there isn't really a need to negotiate sponsorship just because, like, yeah, I think it's more important to get the job first and then talk about eventually sponsorship as you prove yourself in that job. Because like pre working for your employer, there's no reason for them to like sponsor you beforehand. Um, and I think this is true for a lot of my friends who I've talked to about this is they would usually bring it up. Usually, like if you're on a 1-year OPT, most people bring it up at like their 9th or 10th month. Well, it kind of depends on like the H-1B schedule as well, like how close are you to the next lottery and whatnot. But most people mention it in the middle of their in their OPT year, just because they want to show the employer first and foremost that they're solid workers and they're able to contribute to the company and they're actually crucial, before actually bringing it up if the employer doesn't already sponsor. But as for like larger companies, most of the time, if they absolutely do not sponsor, they would make it a point to advertise that. If not, if usually it just says like work authorization required, I think most of the time there's leeway in there for you to either pay for your like visa eventually yourself, after you start working for them for a few months and proving yourself.
Thank you for sharing your own experience. And I think it's important, as we talked about a bit, that everyone's experience is unique.
Yeah.
And we also have immigration attorney presentations on the ISSS website, and there will be more presentations on that topic coming this month if that's on the mind for students.
For sure.
Christy?
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading a chat about when are you able to work without a working permit. Yeah, like for my personal experience, the answer to that should be now, because you would have OPT or CPT. But yeah, like Jen mentioned, definitely check with ISSS on the most up-to-date response to that question. But yeah, what I just said earlier was all based on my personal experience and like me talking to friends who've done the same. So yeah, like the title of this slide, your mileage may vary.
Exactly. I was just going to add on to that. If you are a current student, you'll be able to use your OPT for up to 3 years because you're all STEM students. So that gets you a lot of time working with a company where they don't have to sponsor you. And then after that point, you'll have more conversations with your employer about sponsorship options. But for the purposes of landing that first job, you'll be able to use your OPT. And in just a minute here, we'll talk about finding employers that we know are open to working with international students and using your OPT to hopefully make that process a little bit easier for you too. Are there any other questions that you have for Shane right now? If so, feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand.
Yeah, I have one other thing to add about the topic. Basically, like, how did I talk about international student status and sponsorship with employers? Well, I think this might depend on what major you are in and also what type of job you're getting, like whether it's a government job or something that actually requires citizenship. But in general, during the actual job interview, like I'm not talking about applying, but like once you actually land an interview and you're talking to a hiring manager or someone who's brought in to interview, I generally don't make it a point to mention that I'm an international student, like just focusing on, and mostly just focus on merits of my resume, my experiences and skills and what I can bring to the table. And generally don't bring it up during the interview that you're international, because it doesn't actually, it's not something, it's like a neutral point that you don't really have to bring up during the interview. If that makes sense.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up right now, but if you do have them, feel free to keep asking. But I think we might shift into sharing some additional resources. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end again if you have questions about anything else. So yes, thank you so much, Shane, for kind of sharing your story and what the process looked like for you. I think it's always helpful to hear from other international people who have gone through the process and have been very successful. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, so Jane and I are going to continue on and tag team this a little bit and share some information with everyone else that's listening that could be helpful. So I'm going to send this Z link in the chat window for all of you, but you can also type in the link that you see at the top of the screen. This is a resource that was created specifically for CSE international students. We do have a lot of really good data in our college. So this was just one attempt at sharing all of that data with you. You should all be able to access that Google Doc. If you have any trouble with it, just send me a note in the chat and we can adjust settings. But I think if it's all right with you, Jane, I might walk through some of the resources listed on that Google Doc. And if not, give me a heads up. All right, so as you're opening that document, there are a few different sections of that document, all in relation to job searching as an international student. So you don't need to click into these ones right now, Jane, but the first one is a website that will bring you to a CSE career webpage for international students specifically. It does talk a little bit more about work authorization and some nuances of searching as an international student, including a link to our job search guide, which has a lot more detailed information in it. The second resource brings you to Central Career Services, and there's a nice section on that site that has information specifically for international students again, including a list of top employers that have worked with students who have used CPT and OPT. And then the rest of those 3, 4, and 5 on that sheet are CSE specific data. So Jane, are you able to click into the third one, please? All right, so this is a new spreadsheet that we've created based on career outcome data. So every year that students graduate, we send them a survey and we ask, where are you working? What's your title? And a little bit of information about their career outcomes. So this is specifically for undergraduate international students who have graduated and where they're working, what their job titles are, and it's organized by major. So we try to update it every year when we get our new data. So for example, if you're a chemical engineering student and you're wondering where have other international CSE students gone on to work, you can open up this spreadsheet and get kind of a nice overview of the companies they've gone to and also their position titles. And I just want to preface that it does not mean that you will become that specific title at that company as well, but you know that somebody in the past has done it. So perhaps that company would be opening to hiring another international student, or perhaps they don't have needs to do it this year. So it's just a tool that you can use to start looking kind of by major. And then will you click on that number 4, please? So this is another spreadsheet of our career fair data. It's kind of a clunky spreadsheet, but I'll explain what it is. So we have it organized by each individual career fair that CSE has hosted. And if you scroll over to the right, you should be able to see spring 2022. So when employers sign up for the career fairs, we ask them, are you willing to work with students who have CPT and OPT, or are you even willing to sponsor a student? As Shane mentioned, sometimes employers don't even know what these questions mean. So we're trying to do our best to capture accurate information. So again, not 100% accurate all the time, but this could give you some ideas of, well, it looked like, you know, this particular company this spring said that they were open to working with CPT and OPT. Do a little bit of research on that company. Or you could take that company name and go back to Handshake, do a little search and see if they have any positions posted right now. That can be another way to use that tool. And then I think the third one that we'll show you is the next one on that list. So within the Career Center, we have a whole team of employer engagement professionals, and their jobs are to meet with employers and companies and to hear a little bit more about what those companies need and what they're looking for. They've started asking questions if they hire international students. So how this sheet is organized is you can see the company name, and then the meeting date is when our team has met with that company. So you can see how recent that information is, and then majors that that company is looking to hire. And then they all should say yes, that they hire international students in some capacity. And then sponsorship is a little more limited, but again, you're not going to need sponsorship for 3 years at least. So I'm hoping that some of the CSE specific data will really help you. I think Jane's going to go through some of these other resources in a moment here, but hang on to this Google Doc. You can use it again in the future. And if you have any questions on what the data means, how it's organized, always feel free to schedule a meeting with a career counselor and we can walk you through it as well. All right, thanks, Jane.
It is so amazing to see all the different ways that CSE is working to collect information for international students. Diving in, we're going to look at focus in on some of what Chrissy was mentioning in different ways that we can look for international friendly employers. So Chrissy mentioned a centralized career services website. That is something that I was able to work on with Chrissy and a lot of other career counselors across campus to collect employer resources for international students. So in this website, you'll see that we have US job search and non-US job search sections. For today, we're going to look first at the US job search section. In the second tab, how to look for internships and jobs in the US and international friendly companies. We have some of the links that Chrissy had mentioned. So in the, we have some top 200 lists. This first one is the top 200 CPT employers in the US that has been collected by US Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. So this is what is reported across the country to the government. So it is has all the employers, but what we want to share is that Career Services has not looked at each of these employers to confirm that it is a great potential employer for UMN students. So as you're looking at these lists, and if some employers are interesting to you, you might want to bring it to a career counselor and share some of your ideas. So you can see a lot of the common names that people might hear of: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Deloitte. Yeah, I don't know why that stopped loading. We'll go back to that. So those are fairly recent from 2019. Going back into that tab, we have also worked with ISSS to post lists of employers who have hired UMN undergraduate international students. So these are all of those who have worked with undergraduate specific. We don't have the list for graduate students yet, but we feel that those would be a lot richer because typically the graduate degrees are preferenced by a sponsorship system. So we would see more companies on that, but this is a great place to start to see where UMN undergraduate students are headed. And we also have some lists from before this time period. So by working with a career counselor, you can look through this list and also consider the years previous, like Chrissy also shared the information from CSE can help with this. There's another tool called the USCIS H-1B Data Hub, and that is linked here, or if you just Google USCIS H-1B Data Hub, you'll be brought to this site. This is a fairly recent tool from USCIS, and this is a bit more powerful than some other H-1B tools because it can shows the confirmed applications, whereas some of the other tools show the requested applications. So you can look by state, by city, you could type in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and explore other places that are more higher rates of H-1B, such as California, Texas, New York, or search specific employers that you might be wondering about. So just a really powerful search system that we wanted to share with you. And trying to think if I'm missing anything. Going Global. Has anyone in the group used Going Global before? You can share a reaction in Zoom, thumbs up, or maybe no one has been able to use it yet. Going Global is accessible through Handshake. Let me see if I can open that up for us. And it is helpful for if you're both searching in the US, but also if you are looking for H-1B information. So I have that coming up for us. Handshake, which as Shane mentioned when Shane was a student, was Gold Pass, is now Handshake. If you go to Career Center and in the resources section, you can see Going Global. So clicking through either of these links will allow you to log into Going Global. Country Guides is more of a global career search. US City Guides is more of a US search. So looking in here, you can visit the H-1B tool, which pulls data from myvisajobs.com, and again can filter by year, city, state, metro area, or explore specific companies. This can also be a great tool if you're looking to move other places in the US. In career services, we would always recommend, especially for international students, the broadest search possible and be willing to explore other areas, especially perhaps those that have high H-1B sponsorship rates, which is often the West Coast, New York, Texas. And also Going Global is a great tool for an international search, which you might be exploring. Trying to click through here, but it's still loading. So it allows you to zoom in on different countries or cities. If you're looking perhaps at a third country search, it can tell you how to apply for jobs in that country. We can perhaps explore Amsterdam, explore job search resources, resumes, cover letters, and interviews. There's samples for dozens and dozens of different countries and cities of what resumes, cover letters, interviews, work permits, and visa look like in those locations. So we hope that you might give Going Global a try, that it might be useful for you.
And there are a couple of video tutorials on the Google Doc as well. It is a very big system, so if you feel a little overwhelmed, that's probably normal. But we do have a lot of tutorials out there that will hopefully help you feel a little bit more confident with using Going Global. There's lots of great stuff in it.
Yes, I will get Maroon and Gold Network and LinkedIn up if you want to get started, Chrissy.
So I just sent the links to these two systems. So in addition to using job boards and finding specific names of employers that are open to working with international students, it's also really helpful to find other alums. Just as we heard from Shane today, it's helpful to hear his story and to know kind of the steps that he took and what worked well for him. So connecting to other alumni and learning from what they've done can be super helpful. So the Maroon and Gold Network is a U of M kind of networking alumni database. It's nice because it's fairly new, probably within the last few years. So the information in here is accurate and up to date for the most part. And it's very nice because everybody that's included in the system has opted to be in here to be helpful to each other. So it's not that the U of M just dumped everybody's names in here after they've graduated. Everyone has opted into this system, which is really nice. So if you haven't logged into it before, you'll have to create a profile. If you have a LinkedIn account, you can log in with your LinkedIn and that will pull some of your information over and it makes it a little bit quicker to sign up. But then once you're in, you can see a lot of cool features within the system. So Jane has this map view up right now, and you can see where the pockets of where our alums are currently living. So if you wanted to get connected to positions in Seattle, for example, you can see there's, I think, 38-ish alums right in that area in this system. So you could click into that area and keep fine tuning, and eventually you'll see the actual people's names that live in that area or in other countries, and you can network or reach out to them and ask questions of, you know, I see you're working in, I don't know, Japan. How did you get connected to a position in Japan? So yeah, this is a great example where you can see all of the people that were U of M alums and are now working in that area. So this is the map view. You can also narrow down by location by typing in the location on that top filter if you want. But I really like using some of the other filters in here. So for example, there is a school and college filter. It's next to the location filter on that top toolbar. So if you want to see where other CSE alums working, you can just find College of Science and Engineering and narrow it down that way. And that will start filtering, which can be really helpful to see where people are at and what they're up to. So close to 900 people with CSE in their background. That's not the only way to search. It's nice to start where your people are, but you can search more broadly as well. So in the more filters section, there are a lot of different ways you can narrow it down. You could filter by degree type. So if you want to find other bachelor's level alums, you could select that if you wanted. Or there's this other cool option where there's an international grad student option. And you can say yes or no. So that will indicate if they were a grad student. And then there's another option under help topic called sharing my experience as a former international student. So this is where people can go in and designate what topics they're comfortable talking about, but that's a really nice one to catch international alums within the system. And then once you apply those filters, you should be able to see the people that meet that criteria. And I like this system because, like I said, it's newer, it's a little bit more focused. You're going to get people that match what you're looking for, but the system does a really good job of allowing you to easily message those people, and it kind of populates templates that you can use too. If this ever happens where you get like one result, I would say the search filters were too narrow. So then go back in and open it up, maybe just only select the ones that say sharing my experience as a former international student, for example. So here you can see their profile. You can read a little bit about their background, what they studied, what their degree was. Sometimes people have more thorough profiles in here than others. And then if you do want to connect with them, you can choose the message feature. And then you can pick a template to get started. So I'm doing some career exploration. It'll populate a message for you. Go in there and customize it, make it what you want it to be. So maybe you're looking for some advice. You want to hear how they landed their position as an international student, for example. You can customize that. And then before you send off the message, there's an option for you to request a meeting. And this can be really helpful to have a more in-depth conversation with somebody. So you can go in and pick a couple days and times that would work well for you to have a virtual meeting with them, send it off, and then they get to respond and say, yep, this day at that time works, or they can suggest a new time. And this platform has video software built right into it. So when the time comes, you can conduct your meetings right through here. So these are great opportunities to just ask them some questions. How did you get started? I see that you did an internship here and you landed at this particular company. I'm really interested in doing something similar. What advice do you have for me? And people in this system, they want to be helpful. So you're not bothering anybody by reaching out. That's kind of the whole point. Jane, do you have anything else you want to add with that system? If not, no worries.
Yeah, I would just say the tool is really helpful, especially when you're writing those messages. And if you say anything that it would recommend like not to say, it will correct you and offer other suggestions.
All right, and then another really good tool for finding other U of M alums is LinkedIn. So I sent you the short URL in the chat. If you currently have a LinkedIn profile, you can type in linkedin.com/alumni, and this page will populate for you. Otherwise, you can just type in University of Minnesota in the search bar. This page will pop up, and then you select alumni, and you are brought to the same destination. So this is kind of a cool platform too, because there are lots and lots and lots of alums, way more than the Maroon and Gold Network. But everybody uses LinkedIn in different ways. So sometimes they create a profile and then they never use it again, or sometimes people are very active on here. So pros and cons to each system, I suppose. So you see at the top here that there are some filters where they live, where they work. There are little arrows at the top where it says next, and you can click through and narrow it down by their major, what they do, or even how you're already connected to someone, perhaps, or what their skills are. So in this scenario, if you wanted to find other computer science alums, you could toggle over to the what they studied filter, and you can either type it in, or if you see it right there on the list, you can select it, and this will start filtering. With LinkedIn, you can't filter by degree level, so that's one advantage that the Maroon and Gold Network has. But this is nice because now you can see where they're working. So you're generating a company list. You could keep filtering down, and let's click on Amazon, for example. So I want to see the other computer science students that work at Amazon. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll be able to see all of the profiles that fit that criteria. Now, there's not a specific way to narrow it down by international status, but if you click into some of their profiles, oftentimes you'll be able to see a little bit of a background about them. Perhaps they were in an international student group. You might be able to gather things about their previous experiences that might indicate they were an international student. And very similarly, you could reach out to people through here. You select that connect button, and then you can customize a message when you choose to do that and just say, I see you're working at Amazon with a computer science background. I have very similar interests. Would you be open to meeting with me to chat about your experience? And it might sound weird to do this and uncomfortable, but this is a very common, normal thing to do when you're job searching or doing some career exploration. Now I say the worst that can happen is they don't respond or they say no. And the best that can happen is you get a really good conversation out of it. So I would encourage you all to play around with those two systems and see if you find anything that is helpful for you in that process. All right, if nothing is coming to mind right now, again, I will always say that you can meet with a career counselor, chat with us more about your individual needs and what you're looking for. We're happy to help you in this process because we know it can be a little bit overwhelming, and we're here to help you. So we want it to feel more manageable. All right. Well, thank you all for coming today, and special thank you to Shane and Jane for sharing their expertise and their knowledge. I appreciated having both of you contribute today as well.